Well, good morning, everyone. I'll try that again. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I have a kind of a soft voice, so if I do raise my voice, I'll be trying to do that and shout at you. Won't be alarmed. It's because I am shouting. Okay. But anyway, I checked with the sound guy there at the booth and wanted to know what the time frame was, because you always kind of worry about that. And he informed me that he didn't have enough room on his disc there for a 2-hour message. So I've been up 3 nights hacking away with a utility knife, chopping it down, right? And I guess utility knife, I don't know, maybe I should be using box cutter. Is that what Americans call it, a box cutter? Yeah, okay. It must be the same thing, right? I was confused about that. The ones, utility knife is the one that you push out and you break off the little pieces of big long thing, right? Okay, so we're on the same page. In Canada, we use a utility knife for important things. We don't cut boxes with it. We cut duct tape kind of stuff, important stuff. We use it for different. So anyway, that aside, I would like to leave a message today that I think is very pertinent to the times, because we live in a time when things seem to be in massive confusion. Things happening here, things happening over there, conspiracy theories here, and you look at things and you say, no, that can't be, but it's happening. And so I'd like to talk about Jacob's trouble, that which is mentioned in Jeremiah 30, because Jacob enters a time of trouble. Let's turn over to Revelation, the 7th chapter, and verse 14. We're going to break into this because it's a Tabernacles setting. A Feast of Tabernacles setting. You can always find the festivals in the book of Revelation because they identify themselves. And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, these are the ones who come out of great tribulation. So you can see the setting and the time. And washed the robes and made them white in the blood of lambs. So he's speaking about a certain group, certain tribe. Therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. They shall neither hunger any more nor thirst. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd and lead them to living fountains of water, and God will wipe away every tear. They just come out of great tribulation. What does it say in verse 15? He says, and he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. That word means in the Greek to tabernacle. Actually transliterated, if you go and search it out, it means I will build a tabernacle over you. So we know it's a celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, and what we're looking at there is the fulfillments which will come. So I promised my sister-in-law I wouldn't use too many scriptures, so we're going to go to the Old Testament. I have a couple in the New, and one in the Old. It's like I say, I slash this down. So we're going to go to only one scripture under the Old Covenant, or the Old Testament here. It starts in Genesis 20 to Genesis 27. Let's go back to Genesis 24. You can relax. I'm just... There's a story that we need to sort of grasp, get a hold of. Before we can understand Jacob's trouble, there's the message there. There's some history that we need to kind of get our fingers on and wrap our mind around. Genesis 18, of course, we don't have to go there, is a special selection that God made, and he took Abraham. He took Abraham because he was full of faith and never let go and wouldn't give up. Even if he didn't see the promises in front of him, and even if he didn't get them, he's going to hang on to them, and God wanted that strength, you see. He never took so much as even a shoelace. For many, of the agreements that he made when he would go into war, because he knew the land of Canaan was going to be his, and if God gave him the spoils, he took it, but otherwise he would not. He was a faithful man, and it was that faith, amongst many other things, that God leaned upon. Genesis 24. I'm not going to do a lot of reading out of the scripture because I took the box cutter to that. And so God's looking for good character. Genesis 24, 1 to 67 basically covers what happens after that. Abraham has a son, late in his years, Isaac. He has a good character, but he marries a sister of Laban. My goodness, Laban. And we all know who Laban is, right? A sister of Laban. And he does that for a reason, because he's told when he comes to the point where he needs to go get a wife, he says, don't take him of the children of Canaan, because you can't take over a land and kick them out if you infiltrate them right in the back door. Get rid of them. So he was obligated to go to one place. And 24 and verse 4, it says, you shall go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for the son of Isaac. He's telling his servant that. And so we get the instructions, and Isaac goes, and the story goes on, and he gets Rebekah. But you see, Rebekah, in verse 29, says, now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. Oh, she's a brother to Laban. So there's problem there, maybe. A weakness, you see. It's a little bit of a weakness there. And perhaps this is the reason why maybe God didn't choose him or choose others, but we can't take the Canaanite. Have to be careful, because God is building a nation to give promises to that are extremely important for the peace of the world to come. So, Esau and Jacob come along, because Isaac and Rebekah have twins here. Now, Esau and Jacob were very, very different. And if we turn over to Genesis 25, Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah his wife, and he was as wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. So we get the message again. That's who she is, the sister of Laban. Okay? Down in verse 24. There were twins in her womb, and the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau, which means rough and tough and tumble. You can look all these words up. This is really a good study, and when you go through it and pick it all apart. We're just going to glaze over the surface of it all. And afterwards his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob, which means supplanter, snake in the grass. Different names for Jacob. He's got a weakness. Why does he have this weakness? He has a weakness because his mother is the brother of Laban. It entered. See? So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And so Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game. He was a rough guy. He loved him. He favored him. But Rebekah loved Jacob. So she rocked the cradle, and it's the same old thing. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, right? In this case, it may not have been that, but anyway, there come a time here. Now we're looking at something real serious, and people read over it. Real serious. But it involves you and me, and it involves Jacob's trouble. Something real serious is going to go on here. Jacob's weakness begins to come out. Now Jacob cooked the stew, and Esau came in from the field. I think it was tomato soup. Tomato soup, I'm convinced of that. I thought a lot about that. I like my tomato soup, and you can get it down here. I eat it every day now, and I do always at the Feast of Tabernacles because of this. I love that tomato soup, because it's all made out of lentils and stuff. It's thick and crunchy and it's red, like it says here. See. Please feed me with that same stew, for I'm weary. Oh, so he's weary. Well, why is he weary? Because he was out hunting and decided, oh, shoot, you know what? I forgot my lunch. Got to go home. No. He was out of electrolytes and water. And we all know what that is. Same today as was back then. Dehydration can kill you. We know that. That's what he's talking about. Look, the words in the Hebrew don't come across well in English. Therefore, his name was called, it says, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary. Therefore, his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, see, Jacob, you worm, Jacob. You worm. What's worse in the whole world than taking advantage of somebody who's down on the ground? Nasty. Pretty nasty. And that wasn't Abraham's character. Okay? And so Esau said, look, I'm about to die. And the word is mu'ath. It means pushed quickly to death, to be killed. He was out. He was ready to die, literally. And what did he need? Well, he needed to replace the electrolytes. And what's better than what he said? Give me some of that red soup. Right? Water. Yeah. So Jacob rips off Esau. Ripped him off. But God learned something about Esau too that day. He learned that, you're not like Abraham, Esau. You don't clutch on till death. Jesus Christ proved that point. He says, you don't let go of the promises of God, even though Satan puts a loaf of bread in front of you. Wait till God gives it to you. Be patient. So anyway, thus Esau despised his birthright, and God learned something from that. But he also learned something about Jacob too. Now we got a problem. See, one guy's out the door on the promises. Now he's left with this. That's a problem. The birthright of the firstborn was snatched by Jacob at a time of the greatest advantage and opportunity. And so there come a time when Isaac passes these blessings on now. Genesis 27. See, it doesn't take long to get through that one Old Testament passage of Scripture, eh? When you take a box cutter after it. 27. 6 to 29. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob, her son, saying, indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau. So now, see, she's on to something here because she favored Jacob, see. And she probably knew that Esau was not the kind of person going to hold on to the birthright. He'd give it away. And she probably knew the character of Jacob, because here, Jacob wanted it badly, and that's what God wants. We want it badly. See? So Rebekah spoke to him and said, I heard your dad talking to Esau, and he's going to pass the birthright on to him. And so Jacob, he's worried about this because he doesn't know how that's going to happen. But you know what? Now the character of Rebekah comes out, and she tutors him. Verse 12. Perhaps my father will feel me, says Jacob, and I'll bring a curse on myself. Oh, no. His mother says, no. See? Let your curse be on me. And my son only, on me, my son. Only obey my voice and get them for me. So what does she do? This is a very, very important thing. It is not what it is that's important, but what it is made to appear to be. Okay? We're going to put hair on the hands and we're going to cover it in dirt. Essentially what happened. Verse 23. So Jacob didn't recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brothers. And he smelled them. And he smelled like dirt. See? So whenever you see something that's got a hairy hand on it and it smells like dirt, you know the deal is funny. See? Something wrong with it. It's a fault. It's a fault. It's a character fault. So that was the core of the deception. So in verse 41, we find out that Esau really become distraught. He becomes distraught and he seeks to kill Jacob. He doesn't really succeed because Jacob needs to get out of there. His mother helps him out. I think probably he took too long looking for a box cutter. That's the problem. Jacob was able to get away. Genesis 28. Genesis 28. In verse 1, then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him. So now we have the passing on of blessing. Called and blessed him and said, charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. So here we go again. Here we go again. Jacob now has got to get out of there because Esau is going to kill him. And what happened was Esau came to Jacob to get the blessing, and Jacob says, well, son, there's something, must be something wrong with this kid because he was just here. And then a twig's on him. And so he has to now tell Jacob to get out of there, but go and take a wife from his relatives. Go take a wife from his relatives. So he goes. Genesis 21 or 29, 1. So Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east, and it took and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep. So the old sheep at the well scenario goes on again. And in verse 10, and it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, that's what he saw. Oh my goodness, it was love at first sight. See, it's providential. And it probably was. Because God is working all of these things, but there's a problem he's got to work out as well. Daughter of Laban, his mother's brother. Here it goes again. Came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother. It was his cousin. But pretty close to Laban. Pretty close to the root of what we would call a real problem there in dealings. So Jacob accepts marriage and enters a trial of his life. Like he entered a trial like he probably never ever would have expected. And here Jacob, he's the master supplanter. But he meets this guy who takes him for a royal ride. And he can't get away, as the story goes. He can't get away. It's like he sold his soul to the company goal. And he's caught. And every time he tries to get away, he changed his wages. He changed his wages 10 times. This Laban was a rat. Jacob didn't have a chance. He was disadvantaged. He was like a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest. And he was good at what he did. He got the birthright and the blessing. So we come to the point in a story where Joseph is born. Rachel, his birth, Jacob's true love. And in a sense, his firstborn son for the promises. The rest were just a shyster deal. It was a shyster deal. So Jacob seeks to escape from Laban. As soon as the baby's born, he's got what he wants, right? Now he's got to get out of there. Genesis 30, 22. This is when God came into the picture and intervened into the project here. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, and the Lord shall add to me another son. And we know and understand that that's prophetic. Won't get into that. It came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place. He wants to get out of there. And so Laban cajoles, and they have this big argument, and Laban tries to bargain with him because Laban's got another trap in mind. He's got another trap in mind. In verse 27, and Laban said to him, "Please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes. I've learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake." He said, "Why would you want to go? We can do this thing together." So he's hatching this plot. Then he said, "Name me your wages, and I will give it." See, the plot's coming. But Jacob's smarter this time. I'll just brush over because for time here. So he said in verse 31, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob said, "No, I don't want you to give me anything. I don't trust what you have. I only got one leg here. I'm not going to enter into another contest. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed your flock." So finally Jacob comes to the point where he's going to make a black and white deal with Laban. And he says, "Let me pass through all your flocks and remove there all the speckled, spotted sheep and all the brown ones among the lambs and spotted and speckled among the goats. These shall be my wages." See? And he ain't going to change that because it's black and white. Now when we go through them, we can figure out which ones are which, right? Of course, Laban, he jumps onto it because guess what? Laban is a businessman and he can count. Jacob knows how many of those are in the flock. I mean, they were kind of rejects or runts or whatever you would want to call them. They were just different. And there weren't that many. Most likely, we read between the lines. Otherwise, Laban never would have took the deal. And he's probably chuckling and saying, "Well, yeah, well, you probably, that's a pretty good deal. I'm going to win here. Look at all the nice, beautiful colored animals I got." And he wants those? Yes, he did. And so Jacob finally makes this honest deal. A deal dependent upon God's intervention and blessing. Verse 33 kind of exposes that a little bit. He said, "So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you." So you see, Jacob now has got to depend on God. And so the next part of this story, 37 through 40, says, this is the selective breeding program that Jacob enters into. He put 3 days distance between him and Laban because Laban now is giving him more time to deal with all the flocks. It's like, okay, I'll go out into the wilderness, and this whole selective divine breeding program went on, and sure enough, he succeeded because God was there to deliver the blessing, and Jacob didn't have to put wool on his hands and throw dirt on his face. He dealt honestly, truthfully. Now you can't say, "These aren't mine, Laban." And they come to the point where in Genesis 31, where Jacob escapes. And so you begin to get a picture of Jacob's trouble. Why does Jacob have trouble? Why? He has trouble for a reason. Genesis 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, "Jacob has taken away all that was our father's." You see, so people are beginning to talk because they see him out in the wilderness there, and they have observed what's happening, see? And so they snitch. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban. See? So Laban's starting to get the news. It's backfiring on him. And indeed, it was not favorable towards him as before. No, sir. The more speckled animals there than all the rest. In verse 7, Jacob says, "Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God didn't allow him to hurt me." He says, I took a real kick in here and learned a big lesson. God didn't allow him to hurt me. But now All the speckled ones are going to be mine. And so Jacob escapes. Jacob escapes from Laban, but the story doesn't end there. Jacob was tested by God to see how badly he wanted the blessing. Was it worth dying for? And we then observe the incident where God tests him. In chapter 32 and 23, and on his journey out, he took him and sent him over the brook and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of day. And we understand that God, it was Jesus Christ, probably actually wrestled with him here. Because he wanted to find out if he's going to clutch on to that, he wasn't going to be like Esau and let it go at the point of death. And the story goes on, and just jumping ahead here, verse 29. Then Jacob, 27, he says, so he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, because he wrestled with him right till the dawn. He changed his name because he prevailed. He says, he struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Finally going to be doing things right. He's not going to let those promises go. And he's going to depend on God to bring him the blessing in God's way. That was okay for Jacob. But the weakness prevailed in his children, and they were all then taken to Egypt, where they fell into slavery because they forgot, I am my brother's keeper. And they sold Joseph, the guy whom the blessing was put upon, the ones to transport the blessing of Israel down to the end time. They sold him into slavery. But it backfired. And Joseph became that leader and saved them. And they were 400 years in Egypt. And when they were released, is what we celebrate here today. When they were released from Egypt, it was a celebration of being free from slavery. That's what we read about in the first scripture there. Now we have to understand that that was a real trial for Israel, and God allowed it for the whole household. It was a huge trial because they could have disappeared in Egypt, but they clutched on to the blessing and the promises. How do we know that? Because when Moses took them out of Egypt, they were still organized in their tribes. Weren't dissipated. They didn't mix with the Egyptians like some people think they did. But it was in Egypt that Jacob passed a blessing on to Joseph and his family, specifically that of leadership of Israel in the fulfillments in the end times. Someone had to lead Israel to acquire the blessings of Abraham in the end times, which we now enjoy. We're here because God fulfilled his part of the bargain. And Jacob actually followed through. He actually got the job done. Jacob is Israel, not Ephraim and Manasseh only, but all 12 tribes. They were to be led in the acquisition of the physical promises of God in the end times by the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh. And so Jacob puts his hands out where the older brother is facing the right hand, the greater blessing, and the younger, the lesser blessing. But he crosses them. Manasseh gets a lesser blessing. Ephraim gets the greater one. He's got the biggest job to do. He shall be a nation and a multitude of nations. And we know how that came about because the British Empire became the biggest empire the world has seen. They went out by the blessing of God and acquired the new land. And they acquired it peacefully. Not by putting wool on their hands and smacking their face with dirt. Wherever Ephraim went. Captain James Cook is a good book to read. And you can understand that it was done in such a fashion where they did not go and pillage and take everything from the places where they went. They established rule and order. The British were rule and order people. The sun never set upon the British Empire, but it fell into trouble because that old problem came up. The old problem came up and they began to do bad deals, nasty deals. They didn't want to wait for the promises of God. And so it came to pass that they failed, and they took advantage even of their own brother Manasseh, who got the choice plot of land in all of this. He got the central part, which would sustain much more than many of the other individual countries. It was a choice plot, but they took advantage of it and they settled that thing with a tea party called the Boston Tea Party, and some of you know about that. There was a fracas there. And so it was that Ephraim waned in their rule and control and guidance of the world, and in leading Israel. And Manasseh took over. But it wasn't until 70 years ago when God brought her attention and got her involved in helping poor, failing Ephraim in a battle in the Second World War, and came in the back door and bombed Pearl Harbor, and we know the story. It's all, it's all relative. There are other things, lots of other things we could point to, but this is the thread, the essence of it all. And so Manasseh came to power, and she became the great world ruler, is to this day. But she too is falling prey. It's Manasseh's turn at the wheel. Israel has trouble. Why? There's hair in the hands and the dirt. He smells like dirt, everything he does, it seems. Yeah, it's not what it is that counts, but what it can be made to appear to be that is important in advancing and maintaining her world supremacy. And it isn't no, it isn't just Manasseh to blame. That's not fair. We're involved in there too. We deserve some of that credit or shame. Yes, we're involved in it too. Is it any wonder that the nations of this world are coming or searching around looking for box cutters and come at us with them? I just going to wrap it up here because there's any number of examples I could use, but I'm thinking of one example, just sort of paraphrase it. You kind of marvel sometimes when you see these things going on TV and you sit there and watch, wow, and you try and put it through your head and rationalize it. In France, somebody hijacked a train. You probably remember, you heard about it, right? They hijacked a train. Guess what they found on the guy? And it slashed the guy with a box cutter. I can't get on a train with a box cutter. Nobody can. I can't even get on an airplane with a metal banjo pick in my pocket. They find it. The box cutter was the focal point of terrorist activity. You could always tell when somebody was up to something if they had arrived at the airport with a box cutter in their pocket. They knew you never get the box cutter onto the airplane, and you will never get it on because it is a premier item that caused, 4 airplanes to go down? Passed all levels of security. Everything, everybody missed it. Not just one place, not just one level of security, and searched it. My goodness, I went through the airport with my brother Art, and he's got a bag on his leg, right? And they found him, and they wanted to investigate him. Doesn't even have metal in it, I don't think. So I had to scare him. I said, excuse me, folks, you putting him in there? Would you like to have a psychotic episode on your hand? And boom, they got him out of there right away quick. So you had to be, I don't know, that's probably was a divine thought that came. I don't know. But anyway, just little humorous incidents like that make you wonder. But you see, that was Israel. And you know, I really puzzled about that. How in the world could you get on a train in France with a utility knife and go through 2, I think maybe 3 levels of security? You got to go through. That really got me. Now, I'm not going to mention the AK-47 that he had there, too. I don't know where he stuffed that. You know, the box cutter is a real big deal because in France, they make knives. Famous for it. You know, people get on a train all the time with knives. You go through security. What you got there for? Oh, I got a bunch of knives there. Oh, yeah. Oh, you know, you're going to take grandma a present, aren't you? Yeah, a big, expensive knife. Why didn't he just go and get a 12-inch bread knife or something? Butcher, take it on. But no, he's got to take a box cutter on. Contraband item. See, not to mention the AK-47. I don't know how they got on. I think it was already on there. I don't know. These are all these things. It smells like dirt. And it appears like a furry hand. There's something wrong with the deal there. A diversion. And so it ended up, you know, the unexpected thing happened. 2 of the military guys from another country weren't really informed of the inside job. And they went and took him down. So now the president of France is forced now to abandon whatever diversion it was. And I'm not into conspiracy theories because I think that's the problem with conspiracy theories. And you got to be careful. Don't try to figure out why. But we're commanded, watch and pray always that you may be worthy to escape these things. This is what Jesus Christ said. We need to pay attention to the words of Jesus Christ. He said many things. He gave us many words. Yeah, there's hair on the hands and dirt on Israel. Now, not to mention 9/11. I won't go into that. Go into that. I sat there and watched the whole thing as you did. And now I went to technical school and we studied fire on, and we studied post and beam construction on wood and steel and reinforced concrete. I worked on high rises, we built it, and the effects of fire on all of that. When I stood and I looked at that thing, I thought, what? How in the world can you take it down with an airplane? But just me. We went to work, talked about it, and they said, oh, well, yeah, all the jet fuel in there and burned it up and melted it all, and it just collapsed. And I thought, well, maybe. And as time goes on, you forget about it, you see. It is not what it really is, but what it is made to appear to be. We don't even know why there were 23 trucks that left that place laden with some heavy stuff. Nobody knows. 23 of them left the moment of impact before it fell. All these things come out after, you see, and then you think back and say, oh, yeah, okay. So, 11 seconds it took to drop the building. And I'm saying, you know what? I went to school. If ever I had a contract to take a building down in the middle of a city, a huge building like that, I would go and get the guy with the box cutter. And I have him fly it into there because it would be cheaper. And it'll go straight down in 11 seconds. Free fall, not pancake, tuk, 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 tuk. Free fall, 11 seconds. And it'll drop right into his footprint. 2 of them, not just one, and it doesn't seem to matter where you hit it either. You hit it here, there. And you know what? And they even managed to get one down without a fire or damage. It just fell on its own later in the afternoon. Sort of. It's just something wrong. It smells like dirt. Smells like dirt. No. When you go about trying to maintain something and you start doing bad, rotten, stinking deals to get it, it causes you trouble. Causes you trouble. God does not want that. And God is not happy with Jacob. Jacob meaning 12 tribes. They're all in it together, and I could go on and go other examples, really strange, bizarre ones in other countries. Couldn't get to one guy. Couldn't get the one guy to keep him from shooting a bunch of people up because all of their helicopters had been already rented out by the media. I couldn't figure that one out. I don't want to get into it because I don't have time. So to kind of wrap things up here, under Ephraim and Manasseh's leadership, Israel has resorted to terrible dealings with nations of the world. Terrible dealings with the nations of this world. Horrible, horrible things that makes you weep and you say, "Oh, Jacob, you worm, Jacob, that you have succumbed and stooped so low."